Joe Biden had spearheaded the attempt to cut the cost of living increases for seniors. Obviously, seniors are eligible for Social Security. Back during the Obama administration, in fact, did a end run around then Majority Leader of the Senate, Harry Reid, to try and get that deal done. And talk about what comes around goes around. Right, Emma Vigeland, who's here today?
Right, I am here today. Shocking, I know, but I'm here.
I mean, this may be a little bit of a stretch, but I don't think it's that much of a stretch to say that Joe Biden's pathological desire to believe that the Republican Party was a negotiating partner, I guess maybe 7-8 years ago, perpetuated a lie and a misunderstanding about the Republican Party. And frankly, the so-called moderates, conservative Democrats, that in many respects he fell prey to in the first 10 months of his administration. I think when the history of this Build Back Better bill, which I think by the time we're done with it is going to be, slightly repair some things in a less than fully adequate situation. I don't know if they'll be able to fit that all in the bill.
Build back the bare minimum.
Build back the bare minimum, like maybe not even, I don't know.
And probably not the climate because of Manchin. Manchin's going to get rich.
I believe when the history of this failure to capitalize on the moment comes, because let's be honest, if we're talking about a $1.9 trillion bill over the course of 10 years, I mean, we're talking about something that's not even, what is it, a quarter of our annual commitment to the military? Yep. I mean, it's just simply not.
And now they're talking about the child tax credit only being extended for a year or 2 years, which means, say the Democrats lose the Senate or the House, which is very likely, that's gone, and then they get to own that in an election year. Great move.
This ends up being a political liability.
Right.
But I think when the history of this bill is written, if it's even large enough to be worth anybody's time, frankly, to write about it, the failure to capitalize on the momentum following the COVID relief bill and Biden's, again, pathological desire to appear bipartisan when he first invited the Republicans in to negotiate with him and then allowed for space for Manchin and Sinema and Rob Portman to do their bipartisan bill. I mean, we have seen how much those Republicans and conservative Democrats want that infrastructure bill, the so-called bipartisan one, because it has a lot of stuff that basically are just sort of build back, fill up the potholes, that type of stuff. And
they kept progressives out of that entire negotiation process on purpose. And now they're like, yeah, but we get to have a say, and not just a say, we get to dominate the bill that we were going to.
The point is, if you do not allow that to happen, if you do not allow for the space for the Republicans to come in and try and negotiate it and for this bipartisan group to negotiate it, you then roll that into this bill and it becomes one bill and you push it through right after the COVID relief. There's not as much time for forces to amass to fight against it, all of the moneyed forces. There is more interest by more members of the Senate to pass this bill because it has the goodies they can't do without. I think that, it's very hard to prove the counterfactual, but I really do think that we're going to be looking back on that moment as the time that the Build Back Better bill was basically DOA, not to get all BBB, DOA.
Right. Thank you, C-3PO.
I was going to say WYD.
Right.
What are you going to do?
SMD.
Shake my damn. What?
Yep.
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
Okay, well, just whatever on that one. All right. Well, that's the show for today.
Hello.
Here is Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman sitting down with John Berman. There's only so much any members of the House can do at this point, right? I mean, they passed this bill, or I should say, prepared to pass the entire $3.5 trillion bill. And they don't have any leverage. Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman have no leverage with Sinema or Manchin, I guess, to some extent. One could argue that they have some leverage with Chuck Schumer, who has failed to do anything other than act as a concierge for the members of the Senate. Failed insofar as seemed to be the only person he trusted in the entire Democratic Party, with the knowledge that Joe Manchin was saying $1.5 trillion. I mean, what if the forces that were in favor of a larger bill were aware 4 months ago that Joe Manchin had said $1.5 trillion?
Yeah, why not just sit on it, though, and not tell anybody about it, Chuck Schumer?
Maybe they could, Bernie Sanders could have been working on that 4 months ago.
Yeah, maybe he didn't have to take out an op-ed in the West Virginia paper to shame Manchin at the 11th hour as these cuts have already happened.
Exactly.
Schumer has let these two members of his caucus dominate, and he's just let the inmates run the asylum to be clear, the opponents of this bill knew what they were attacking 4 or 5 months ago, but the proponents of this bill did not know what they were fighting against. Yes. And that is because Chuck Schumer decided, for whatever reason, to sit on that information. I don't even know if Nancy Pelosi knew She
it.
didn't, and I mean, there was some reporting that she was pissed about it.
I don't blame her. I would be.
She does a better job than he does in this respect.
Even if you know in July that this isn't going anywhere, why do you let the Democrats go out and embarrass themselves? Because regardless of what you get now, it's going to look like failure. On some level, it is going to failure from a policy standpoint. I'm just talking from a political standpoint. Chuck Schumer is now responsible for the magnification of the failure of the Democrats. I'm not sure that, frankly, they could have passed the entire bill or none of the bill, and it would have made an electoral difference in and of itself in terms of the benefits. But certainly, going into 2022, this is going to look like a failure for the Democrats. And Chuck Schumer owns at least that part of it by denying full information to all the stakeholders.
Because he thought that he could get him out of that position and didn't want to publicize it. I don't even know what the play was.
I think that Schumer perceives himself as a concierge for the Senate. And so what he was doing was sort of like a bag check. He took it and put it into the cloakroom and hung it on the thing and just said to Joe Manchin, whenever you're ready, you come and tell me and I will go find it for you. And all you have to do is give me a little tip.
Oh, well, that's I guess, the role of the Senate Majority Leader, I guess, these days.
Here is Representative Cori Bush and Representative Jamal Bowman. Bush, of course, from St. Louis, and Bowman from New York, on CNN's New Day with John Berman.
The expectation is we will give you crumbs and expect you to be happy. What we're saying is I didn't come to Congress to continue to give crumbs to my community. St. Louis continues to get crumbs, and we keep being number one for homicide, number one or number two for homicides, number one for police murder, number one for the murder of children. We keep having those issues. We keep having issues with 10 black children being 10 times as likely to go to the hospital in emergency room for asthma than white children. How do we fix those things? You have to put the money there. And so I didn't come to Congress to sit back and accept those crumbs. Give my folks the meal. And that is why we're here, to push that.
No, don't ask us why aren't we willing to compromise. Ask Joe Manchin, yes. Is he okay with violence in our communities continuing, public housing falling apart, black and brown people disproportionately dying from COVID, the climate crisis? Ask him to go bigger instead of asking us to go smaller.
To be clear, we're asking every member, where they're going to go and where the possible agreements can be reached. Paul Begala was on earlier today and talked about progress versus perfection.
That's not even, but we're talking about a package that is not even perfection.
3.5 trillion was the compromise.
Right, that was the compromise. This is not
President
perfection.
Biden came in at 6 trillion.
Again, I'm making the argument that Joe Manchin is making here because he's not sitting here, but he would say 1.5 trillion isn't crumbs.
Tell Joe Manchin to come to my district.
That's right.
Tell him to come to my district. Tell him to meet with me, and I'll take him to see what happens when you give a little of something, and you expect people to live off of that. Because what'll happen is that 1.5 trillion or whatever it turns out to be that he wants, it'll be, oh, we did something for you.
Mm-hmm. We spend 7.6 trillion on the military alone every 10 years.
Yes.
And it's okay for us to spend that money. No one bats an eye, but we're looking to spend 3.5 over 10 years. That most of it is paid for on a bottom up economy to target those most vulnerable. And we have a problem with that. Black and brown people, black and brown women, indigenous people, poor people. We always have to wait. You always ask, not you, the government always ask us to kick the can down the road for the most vulnerable. And people, to me, that's unacceptable.
The Bowman brings up the real point there. Yeah. If you're saying $1.5 trillion is not crumbs, my response is 7.5 trillion in military spending. And let's be clear, I don't know that we've had a year, at least in the past 3 or 4 or 5 years, where that number hasn't gone up.
Yeah.
They keep getting a bump. This year, Congress gave the Pentagon more than they asked for.
Yeah, they do that every year. Oh, here's a little sweetener, a little cherry on top while we got to cut for
this year. It's going to be $770 billion. Next year, it's probably going to be closer to $800 billion. By the time you get 10 years out, you could be talking about another $100 billion, functionally $1 trillion over the course of 10 years.
Which is half of what we would be spending on that year with this current proposal for Build Back Better, $190 billion. That's how you reframe it. Like Bowman made the key point there. But Cori punches back. Together, they're just, a great tandem. And you saw how Berman was just holding up the last.
It's not me.
I'm just playing the role of Joe Manchin. It's definitely not my position. And they also never ever substantively talk about what is in that top line number and what is getting cut. 1.9 trillion sounds big, right? Okay, that satiates the audience. What are the parts that are getting done away with? Are we going to talk about what those cuts mean? Or are we just going to be like, big number, smaller number, compromise? That's not politics. We're talking about policies that affect people's lives. I don't care about the number if it's just garbage in it, which is pretty much what the bipartisan infrastructure package contains. So let's talk about the policies within these structures and not just, the surface level figure.